Hey, hello Bio2. We're continuing on with chapter 27 and we're going to take a look at our final group of worms, and this group is known as the Annelids. So we're going to look at what are the defining features of an annelid, or annelid, sorry, annelid. Annelid is how you say that, I'm sorry, annelid. So annelids are worms with segmented bodies. So that's going to be the main defining characteristic of this group, is the segmented body, and they have a true column that is lined with tissue that came from our mesoderm. So again, we've had a no column to a pseudo column, to now we finally have a true column within our annelids. So here is what this looks like. Again, we have our digestive tract surrounded by the column, and then our different layers of the mesoderm and our endoderm and our ectoderm. So that's what the three germ layers of our annelids look like. And so the body of our annelid, again, is divided into segments. That's, again, going to be the big characteristic of this group. And so each segment is separated by what's known as septum, which are the internal walls between each segment. So septum is going to be a word you're going to need to know, be able to associate it with. This is the fact, or this is the term that describes the internal walls that will separate each segment of our annelids. And then the body segments can have a variety of things that include eyes, antennae, and other sense organisms, or they can be specialized for functions such as respiration. So there's different segments of the body will carry out different functions. And there are bristles on these segments as well that are called setae that can be attached to each segment. And then annelids have what's known as a tube within a tube digestive tract that food passes through from the mouth to the anus. So if you can we'll go back a little bit. So the tube within a tube makes sense because our digestive tract is surrounded, it's its own tube, and then the shape of an annelid's body, and with the column as well, inside of a tube as well. So that's why it is a tube within a tube digestive system. So form and function in annelids. So annelids have complex organ systems, and many of these systems are unique because of the segmented body plan of this group. So a lot of these organ systems are going to be only found in this group because of how they are segmented. And we're going to take a look at those more as we get in with these essential functions. So feeding and digestion. So in carnivorous species, the pharynx usually holds two or more sharp jaws that are used to attack prey. Remember, the pharynx is that tube that is up by their mouth, and so in this group the pharynx will have two or more sharp jaws that are used to attack prey. And annelids that feed on decaying vegetation have a pharynx that is covered with sticky mucus. So this sticky mucus can kind of, again, just help them probably break things down and kind of help them stick to what they are eating to. And then there are other annelids that will obtain nutrients by filter feeding, so just by taking in everything and then kind of spitting out what they don't use. So in earthworms, we'll use this as an example, the pharynx will pump food and soil into their esophagus. So notice food and soil. So this is kind of an example of filter feeding almost. And because the food will move through the crop where it can be stored, and it then moves into the gizzard where it is ground into smaller pieces, and the food is absorbed farther along in the digestive tract of the intestine. So two words here, crop and gizzard. If you're familiar with chickens, they have these terms as well, and they serve almost the same function in the worms as they do in chicken. So the crop is used for food storage, and the gizzard is used for grinding the food into smaller pieces. And so that's how they, again, an example of feeding that can almost be considered filter feeding because they take this food out of the soil. So our next one is circulation. So this is going to be one that's different for this group because annelids typically will have a closed circulatory system in which blood is contained within a network of blood vessels. So the rest of all of our animals have relied on diffusion for their circulatory system. However, the annelids now have what is known as a closed circulatory system, so it's closed off from the rest of their environment. And so then there's blood that is in the dorsal, or their top vessel, that moves towards the head of their worm. And this dorsal blood vessel functions like a heart because it contracts rhythmically and helps pump blood. So there's actually a blood vessel, again on the top part, that is going to contract and function as a heart that will help pump blood throughout the worm. And then there's blood that's in the bottom vessel that runs from head to tail. And then that's just, again, so we have the top one where the blood will move towards the head of the worm, so it goes from the back to the head. and then it runs from the head to the tail going the opposite way. And then in each body segment there's a pair of smaller blood vessels that connect the dorsal and ventral blood vessels and supply blood to the internal organs. So there are little branches off of each vessel that will kind of help supply the internal organs of these segmented worms. And so that's their circulatory system. So again, that's pretty complex compared to what we've talked about so far. And so now respiration. So there are aquatic annelids that will often breathe through gills. And then a gill is just an organ that is specialized for the exchanges of gas underwater. So the most famous example, obviously, of organisms with a gill would be the fish. And land-dwelling annelids will take in oxygen and give off CO2 through their moist skin. So that's respiration can be done, again, not through a complex organ, almost kind of through a little bit of diffusion type thing there. So they're not quite as advanced as our other animals yet, but the most advanced that we've talked about so far. And so for excretion, digestive wastes will pass out through the anus, and then there are cellular wastes that contain nitrogen is eliminated by what are known as nephridia. So that's a new word for this group, nephridia. And these are excretory organs that will filter fluid in the colon, and they will also help us remove excess waste. And then for response, most annelids will have a well-developed nervous system that consists of a brain and several nerve cords. So we actually have a brain. For the first animal that we can actually say has a brain, and it's controlled by many nerve cords. So that's it for our first part of annelids. Let me know if you have any questions.